So in this video I'm going to go through every little detail, everything you can do to film your own carp fishing vlog. Just little things that I've done over the years. I've learned lots of mistakes that I made that I could probably get you through them quicker just by watching this video. So let's go. So the first thing is, when you get there to the lake, focus on your fishing first. Do not take the camera over your fishing. Filming is secondary. First of all, it's find the carp that you're fishing for, figure out what swim you're going to go into, put the effort in yourself to make sure that you catch for the camera, because if you start focusing more on the filming, then your fishing becomes really terrible, and if you don't catch, then it makes the video look really bad. Obviously sometimes you put loads of effort in and you don't catch. That does happen, obviously, but first things first, figure out what you're going to do, where you're going to go and everything else, and then you start getting ready for the filming. You can always film you setting up if you want to. I find it can be a bit boring. I tried it when I started and I didn't think it was very interesting. I thought it was more interesting just to get going. So, you know, set everything up first. If you're doing a night, get all your bivvy in your bed and everything all sorted, get yourself relaxed into the swim before you start filming. So once you're all set up, start filming you doing all your like baiting up, casting, things like that. I do recommend that you change angles as well now and then if it's the same action. So say like you're fishing 3 rods on one spot and you're spomming, instead of filming you putting in 20 spoms, film like one from a wide angle, one from maybe a slight close-up angle from the side, and then maybe even film you putting the bait in your spom or whatever you're using. Again, also if you're using like a throwing stick, film from different angles, even film maybe your hand putting the bait into it, stuff like that. Try and mix it up, try and make it interesting as possible. When you go to cast in, do the same thing. Each rod that you cast out, obviously if it's just 2 rods, it's 2 different angles. If it's 3 rods, 3 different angles. Just change where the camera is. Make sure you've got a tripod so you can film higher or lower shots as well to make it more interesting. I've experimented with tilting the camera up and having it low, stuff like that, you know, all sorts of things. Having the camera at the front of me as well, and pointing it up so you can see me sort of casting over the top. That's quite a good angle. Just play around with it. It's all about experimenting and trying to figure out what looks interesting. So once you've done all that, then you can move on to doing your beginning of your video. So I recommend standing up to do your beginning, but you can sit down in a chair and start your video. Basically your beginning, even though it's a bit weird, it's not filmed at the beginning, it's better to do it once the rods are out, because that means that you're sort of happy that you're starting fishing. You're actually starting to try and hopefully catch something. I have done my beginnings at the end of my session a couple of times, mostly because I've forgotten to do it, and so I'm like, oh no, I haven't done a beginning. Oh, I'll just do it at the end, you know, make it out that I'm just starting fishing really. But this is what it's sometimes like. Sometimes you have to sort of do things and not in order. Sometimes you have to do things out of order, but it makes sense in the end once you pull it together. When you do your beginning of your video, all you need to talk about is where you are, how long you're fishing for, maybe if you're fishing for a certain carp, or maybe you want to have a target of what size you want to catch or how many you want to catch, etc, etc. You can keep, you know, make it interesting, draw people into the video, you know, just say like, oh, I'm here to catch a 40-pounder or something like, ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, let's see if you can do it. You can also sign off your little beginning bit by saying, you know, let's get on with it or something like that, but my one's let's go. It's just something I started doing. Once I did it on my first video, I just continued, and I did drop it for a little bit, but then I brought it back because everyone wanted it. Everyone wanted the let's go, so it came back. So yeah, recommend coming up with something a bit catchy, something that people remember. Yeah, it works out. It works in the end. It works. People pick up on it, definitely. Once you've done that, take a couple of shots of the lake, 4 shots from your swim. If you can film from another swim, that's pretty good, but obviously don't leave your rods, you know, because you could ruin your chances already. But make sure that you've got a couple of shots of the lake, so when you start talking about the lake in a bit more detail, once you do your proper talking bit about where you're fishing, what you're fishing to, you're going to need little shots of the lake just to show, you know, visually show what you're talking about. So obviously next I'm going to talk about you actually properly talking about what you're actually doing. So you sit down. I do recommend sitting down, by the way, for this one, because it's more of a discussion between you and the camera. Obviously you're talking to the audience, but you're talking to a camera on the bank. Oh yeah, one more thing is, it's a bit weird talking to a camera, I must admit, but you do get used to it. You know, I'm talking to a camera right now and I've got no issues. So you do get used to it after a while. But getting back to you sitting down and talking. Now, when you're sitting down and talking about, like, you can explain a bit more about what swim you're in, where you're fishing to, what bait you've got on, what bait you're putting over the top. And then at the end, just say, like, let's see what happens or something like that. And then you're done for the talking bit. Next, I recommend filming your hook bait or hook baits. You know, depends on if you've got different baits on different rods. You can film your lead or your rig. It's up to you what detail you'd like in your video. You want to film your spod mix or your boilies because you talked about them. Pretty much everything you talked about as much as possible at that beginning bit. Make sure you film it, and then you can plonk it over the top in the edit and visually show what you've been babbling on about, really. That's pretty much it. So then I move on to cutaways, also known as B-roll as well. It is something that breaks up your video. Now, in between each talking part that you're going to be discussing what's happening or what's going on, or between you each fish, you never know, you might have a good session. But breaking it up, your video, you've got to film shots of wildlife, trees maybe shaking in the wind, that's always a really good one, rod tips, alarms. You can film you recasting, rebaiting, maybe walking up and down the bank having a look, maybe you're peeking in between trying to look to see if you can see any fish on your spot or something like that. It just keeps people interested and it just keeps the video going. Recommend showing that it's going dark by using these as well. So what I mean by that is do a shot of either the lake or the rod tips or the sunset going down, and then another one maybe just into dark or just before dark, just to visually show that it's gone dark and you've done a night. You could always cut to you having a fish in the morning or a couple of shots in the morning to show that it's morning, and then boom, you can go straight into your morning talk part and you can start talking about how bad the night went or how good the night went. I don't know. I'm not there. But yeah, that's what happens really. And then pretty much every time you do a talk, again, go away and do a few shots just to break it up. I recommend 5 or 4 if you really don't want to do too many, just to break it up. Then you just keep going, just keep doing that cycle. You keep doing that cycle. If you're talking about something and you're mentioning it, go off and film it after, to pull it over the top so people can see it visually. That is always really good. And then just break it up with a few cutaways, and yeah, it'll just keep going like that until you get to the end. You can either end with a carp, or you can end with you just saying, you know, just like as you started, where you're standing up and you're looking at the camera and you're saying, oh, I didn't do so well, or oh, I did alright in the end, or something like that. You can end it like that, that's absolutely fine. Your beginning, your ending can be as whatever you want. Visually, you can do whatever you want. You could be holding a fish at the beginning, or you can be holding a fish at the end. I do recommend not holding a fish at the beginning. If you've caught one straight away, just say that you caught it after. Don't say you caught it at the beginning. Every time I've done a beginning of a video with a fish, it's always done badly. I don't know why. You think that would be the best thing ever, but it doesn't seem to be. I recommend doing it straight after the talking, your first talking bit, because that gets a bit of anticipation of what's going to happen, and then boom, you've got that fish. So just make out that you call it after. If you've just put the rods out and you had to take instantly and you haven't done your talking bit yet, just make it out that it's been a little while. It does sound like you're lying and you're making it up, but when you're there, you're making a video, something visually that people can watch. The camera will definitely get in the way while you're out and fishing. It's not the same as normal fishing. You have to try and keep your story going. It must be interesting, and you can make it as funny as possible if you want. If you want to walk around holding the camera and just like, I don't know, do whatever you want. You can have your own cooking part in there where you're cooking your food. You can do whatever you like. It's sometimes you can just, you know, keep filming bits and bobs as long as your little structure is there and you've got your talking bits and you've got your little bits that break it up. It's still a video. Just keep playing around with it and just keep trying to do more and more interesting things in your videos. I do recommend having a camera that's easier to use as well. The one that I'm using is actually a manual camera. Believe it or not, it's the most hardest camera to use when you're doing vlogs, because most of the time I'm not behind the camera. I can't fix the problem. So sometimes sometimes I can have out of focus things, sometimes things all go wrong because I've used the hardest camera ever. But you can use cameras that are pretty much, you know, like the vlogging cameras, pretty much good to go straight away. You don't have to mess around too much. But I went and used my camera that I had at the time, and I still got it, and it is a bit of a pain, but you know, it's done well for me, and I've done really well with it. So I'm still going to use it. Oh, one more thing I'm going to talk about is how do you film yourself having a take. How do you film yourself playing a fish, and also once you had one obviously on the bank, and how do you do that? So I'm going to quickly go over that. So set your camera up, ready to go, in the right position when you think you're going to get a bite. Make sure that you've got enough in there as well, wider shot, just so when you play the fish you can get yourself in there. Because you don't want to go suddenly off camera if you can't see it, because obviously you're focused on playing the fish. So I recommend just having the widest shot as you can possibly get, just so you know that you're going to be in there at some point. And then just literally just slap record as soon as you get that first beep or something like that, and then just go from there. In the edit you can mess around with it and zoom it in a little bit and you can sort of change it a little bit to make it a bit more interesting. Obviously cut it down because it might go on for ages. But yeah, you get to play around with that a lot. But also once you've sorted it out and you're ready to start filming your fish, I do actually recommend putting your chair on your mat or your barrow or something like that, so you can kind of see where you're going to be when you start holding your fish. You can sort of have a rough idea of where you're going to be. For a manual camera I have to set the focus onto that, but for other cameras, just so you can sort of figure out, you know, quite where you're going to be. And then obviously once you've got the fish on the mat, lift it up, have a look and see if make sure you're not covering your face with the fish as well, because that's just daft. I do actually recommend push your screen out, flip it round so you can see exactly what's happening on your camera, and then make sure that you just check out where you are on the camera. Make sure you hold the fish up, figure out where you are, make sure you're nice and centered, and then you can start talking. Now, the talking part's pretty easy really. Just say how big it is, where did you get it from, maybe talk about the fight, things like that, and then yeah, talk about the fish and how amazing it is or how big it is, and maybe it's a PB, something like that, and then pull it back. I do recommend sort of filming you taking it off the mat, pull it back on the mat, then stop recording, then go and put the camera down the lake. Make sure it's a downward angle, then you can go and get the fish and take it to the water and release it. is a bit of a kerfuffle. It is annoying. Things that can be frustrating. I find things can be very frustrating while filming. The amount of times I've almost given up because it got in the way of my fishing. But after a while, you start to enjoy it. It starts to become routine, and you just don't see any issues with it at all, apart from the normal issues you get with it. Yeah, I've had problems with my camera in the past. I've had water in the lens. I've had all sorts of problems. But these things happen to you while you're out filming, and you just have to adapt to it. I've got myself a clip-on mic, if you've noticed that, just so I can get better quality talking. You can hear me clearer. There's not so much wind in this. If you've got a mic on top of the camera, it will pick up anything in between you and the camera, wind and all sorts of things. It's going to pick up outside noises as well. This one does pick up some noises, but there'd be really high noises to pick it up. I also recommend putting music along with your video as much as possible. You can put some over talking, but I recommend not doing it all the time. Sometimes a bit of a break can work in your favour as well. But just little bits of music in between your cutaways and also maybe playing fish and stuff like that. You can put dramatic music if you want, something like that. Yeah, all sorts of interesting music out there. If you do start your own YouTube channel, I do recommend sticking to the music that YouTube provides, because you won't have any problems whatsoever. If you're using music that's not recommended by them, it will flag up, and once you get over 1,000 subscribers, you won't get any money for it because you weren't meant to use that music. So I do recommend just looking through that music. I always go through it myself. I'm always going through the list of music they recommend, finding something that goes along with fishing. There's not that many, but experiment with different bits of music and try to see if it works. It's got to work with your video. It's got to go along with it, and it's got to sort of, I don't know, put in that sort of vibe of fishing, and also that anticipation and things like that. So that's what music's for, is just to keep it going, keep people interested, and it does work really well. But you just gotta keep playing around with music and trying different things. I'm always experimenting with music that I didn't think would go with fishing videos, and it does. Eventually it does. So yeah, that's pretty much everything that I do. I'm constantly on the move when I'm fishing and filming. I'm constantly trying my hardest to try and catch, as well as trying to make sure that everything is filmed, every little detail is in there. It is tiring and it is knackering to do it all, but you get a really good video out of it, and you're proud of yourself that you've made something that's interesting and people want to watch. So that is how you film a carp fishing vlog. Can look a bit complicated, seem a bit annoying when you're doing it, but after a while you get so used to it, it doesn't really bother you as much, and I think you eventually will enjoy doing it, just like I am. So all I've got to say is thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, don't forget to check out all my other videos, and also don't forget to put a comment.